Helena, a 90-year-old woman, had spent most of her life facing the harsh realities of the streets. Every day was a battle to get enough to eat, and her routine involved carefully counting her coins to ensure she could satisfy her hunger. But one day, as she entered a famous bakery in the city, Helena faced a particularly painful moment that further shook her already fragile spirit. It was almost noon, and the sun was shining brightly over Sao Paulo. Helena, with her hesitant steps and visible shyness, walked through the bakery's automatic door. The place was filled with customers chatting animatedly, and the sound of laughter and conversation echoed through the hall. Every step Helena took seemed to be a challenge, and the sound of her footsteps on the cold tiles felt amplified by her sense of insecurity. She adjusted the tattered scarf around her wrinkled neck, trying to protect herself from the cold and the watchful eyes of other customers. Her white hair was tousled by the cold wind blowing through the city center. Her clothes, worn and faded, told stories of much better days that had long since passed. Helena carried the weight of a lifetime of hardships on her shoulders, and her hands trembled as she adjusted the scarf. She was a picture of resilience, but also of deep sadness. The people around her moved quickly, some casting pitying glances while others stepped aside to avoid any contact. Helena was used to these judgmental looks. Over time, she had learned to distinguish between genuine compassion and mere pretense, and had somewhat resigned herself to accepting this as an inevitable part of her life. Sadness and rejection were constant companions, and loneliness was her shadow. The only reminder of a happier past was a delicate silver necklace with a blue quartz pendant. This necklace was all that remained of her daughter Barbara, who had died in a car accident 30 years ago. The loss of Barbara was a devastating blow. At 60, Helena had been unable to find a way to cope with the grief and pain, and the life she knew began to crumble. Without family to support her, she sank into sadness, stopped paying her bills, and was eventually evicted from her home. With no resources to pay for a shelter, Helena had to adapt to life on the streets, carrying only the necklace as a precious and painful reminder. In the bakery, Helena approached the display case filled with bread, pastries, sweets, and cakes that seemed so distant from her reality. Her eyes, marked by exhaustion and hunger, fixed on a simple loaf of bread wrapped in a clear plastic bag. She knew that the bakery's homemade bread was cheaper than industrialized loaves, and with visible effort, she began to count her coins. Her trembling hands sifted through the worn coins, which shone faintly under the bakery's lights. It was a small amount, but it was all she had. With a sigh, Helena looked for someone who could help her. The cashier, a young woman with green-dyed hair, was nearby, and Helena watched her with a mix of hope and anxiety. The bakery, with its welcoming appearance and tempting aromas, seemed like a world away from Helena's hard life. She waited, with a heavy heart, for the moment when the young woman might, perhaps, make a difference in her difficult afternoon. Helena looked at the cashier with a mix of curiosity and sympathy. It was rare to see humble people like her passing through, but something about the elderly woman's fragility made the young woman approach. "How can I help you, ma'am?" the cashier asked, her voice gentle and contrasting with the constant noise of the bakery. Helena looked at the young woman for a moment, and her blue eyes, full of wrinkles, shone with gratitude. "A piece of bread, please," she murmured, extending the trembling coins in the palm of her wrinkled hand. The cashier took the coins carefully and, as she counted them quickly, made a doubtful expression. She knew that the money wasn't enough. "Of course, ma'am, one moment, please. You can leave the coins at the counter, and we'll see what we can do," she said, turning to grab the bread and place it in a plain paper bag. For Helena, that piece of bread meant much more than just food. It was a promise of relief from the constant hunger that followed her. As the clerk packed the bread, Helena looked around the bakery. People of all ages and walks of life rushed by, each absorbed in their own concerns. She felt like a distant observer, watching a world she no longer belonged to. When the clerk handed the bag of bread to Helena, a fragile smile appeared on the wrinkled lips of the elderly woman. "Thank you so much, young lady. May God bless you," she said, accepting the bag with a look of gratitude. The clerk smiled back, touched by Helena's silent dignity. "No need to thank me. Take care, all right?" Helena nodded slightly, feeling the warmth of the freshly baked bread in her hands. She moved away from the counter, a little lighter despite the weight of her life on the streets. With slow steps, she began to head toward the bakery's exit. Raul, the bakery manager, watched the interaction with a stern expression. He had made it clear to his staff several times. Food should not be given away for free to the homeless. Vivian, the clerk, despite her generous gesture, was disobeying a direct order. Raul approached the counter with firm steps, his gaze shifting between Vivian and Helena. "Vivian," he said, his tone irritated. "How many times have I told you about this? We can't just give away food to everyone." Helena, holding the small piece of bread, looked at Raul with eyes full of embarrassment and sadness. "I have some coins, sir," she said, extending her trembling hand. "Maybe it's enough." Raul looked disdainfully at the worn-out coins in Helena's hand and replied, "That's not even enough to." The atmosphere in the bakery was filled with murmurs and whispers of disapproval. The manager, Raul, a man of imposing stature and a stern expression, looked at Helena with a contempt that seemed to cut through the air. "You're just going to bother the customers or try to take someone's wallet. Get out of here now," he said, his voice laden with ruthless coldness. Helena, an elderly lady with a face marked by the wrinkles of life and a tired gaze, hesitated in the face of the harsh words. Her eyes, which normally conveyed a calm wisdom, were now filled with a mix of desperation and hope. She turned to Vivian, a young clerk who seemed to show a glimmer of empathy, and with a trembling voice, pleaded, "Please, I just need some food, anything." Vivian, who was behind the counter, looked at Helena with a concerned expression, but the situation was beyond her control. "I'm sorry. I really wanted to help," she murmured, her voice filled with regret and helplessness. Raul, with his arms crossed and a severe gaze fixed on Helena, repeated with even more intensity, "You can't buy anything with that. Get out of the bakery." His words were like stones thrown into a calm lake, creating waves of tension that began to spread. The conversation started attracting the attention of the surrounding customers. A middle-aged woman, with disheveled hair and an irritated expression, who was close to the counter, shot a scathing look at Helena. In a loud enough tone for everyone to hear, she exclaimed, "You're bothering everyone here. Why don't you go ask somewhere else?" The humiliation was palpable, and Helena felt her face flush with shame, turning as red as a ripe apple. She turned her gaze to Raul, seeking a spark of mercy, but found only a hardened, disinterested expression. The manager, relentless in his determination, took the bag of bread from Helena's hand and reiterated with an unyielding tone, "You need to leave now." With her head down and her heart heavy, Helena slowly turned and began to walk toward the exit. The metallic clinking of the coin she had gathered throughout the day, swinging in her hand, seemed to echo with every step she took. The murmur of disapproval from the customers continued, a cruel soundtrack that accompanied her as she left the bakery behind. As Helena was leaving, Danilo, a well-dressed businessman known for his luxury boutiques, entered the bakery for a quick coffee. His eyes, usually attentive to the sophisticated environment of his business, were now fixed on the scene unfolding before him. The look of concern on his face turned into deep distress as he witnessed the inhumane treatment Helena was receiving. The pivotal moment came when Danilo saw Raul refuse the piece of bread and order it to be thrown away. His previously relaxed face now showed tension and resolve. With firm and determined steps, Danilo approached Raul, his imposing presence contrasting with the manager's cold demeanor. He knew it was time to intervene and try to restore some dignity and humanity to the situation. Danilo was clearly angry. He approached Raul, the manager, with a serious look and a controlled but enraged voice. "This is absolutely unacceptable. How can you treat someone like this?" Raul was taken aback. He hadn't expected someone as influential as Danilo to care about a homeless person. Raul knew Danilo was a major businessman and a frequent customer of the bakery. He had seen Danilo talking to the owner several times. She was bothering the customers, Raul tried to explain, attempting to justify his behavior. "She's homeless and doesn't have money to pay for anything." Danilo, with eyes flashing with indignation, responded, "That doesn't give you the right to treat her with disdain. She's a person and was just asking for food, not charity. It's crucial to show a bit of empathy." Raul hesitated upon hearing Danilo's serious tone. Some customers around began to notice the conversation, and the atmosphere grew tense. Vivian, who was watching closely, felt a pang of hope seeing someone standing up for Helena. Danilo continued, now with a firm voice. "As a manager, you have a responsibility to treat everyone with dignity. This woman has as much right to a piece of bread as any of us and deserves respect, especially being elderly. It's our duty to help those in need, especially in situations like this." Raul tried to respond, but Danilo interrupted him with a hand gesture. "I will pay for her bread and for anything else she needs. I hope that next time, you will think twice before treating someone this way." Without waiting for a response, Danilo headed toward the door, following Helena's steps. Vivian, seizing the moment, grabbed an extra loaf of bread, placed it in a bag, and quickly handed it to Danilo. "Thank you so much for this," the cashier said quietly, looking at Danilo with gratitude. Danilo nodded, took the bag of bread, and hurried out. Outside the bakery, he found Helena sitting on the curb with coins still in her hand. Danilo knelt beside her and extended the bag of bread that Vivian had given him. "I'm sorry for what happened inside," Danilo said kindly. "Here's some food for you. What's your name?" Helena looked at him, surprised and touched by the unexpected kindness. "Thank you, my name is Helena," she murmured, tears in her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you." Danilo smiled softly. "You don't need to thank me. Just take care of yourself. And if you need more help, you can reach out to me. My name is Danilo." Helena held the bread with gratitude, feeling a comforting warmth. Danilo felt a sense of relief in his heart. After the act of kindness from a stranger, the hardships of life on the streets seemed a little bit lighter. He stood up, realizing he had done something truly important that day. It was an act that could inspire others to do the same. But Danilo knew that wasn't enough yet. The elderly woman had been mistreated by the bakery manager, and that bothered him. Then, an idea popped into Danilo's mind. He turned to Helena, who was still sitting on the sidewalk, and called her gently. "Helena, please come with me. A piece of bread isn't enough. I'm going to buy you lunch." The two of them entered the bakery again. Danilo, with a firm expression, approached Raul, the manager. "I sincerely hope you reflect on this. No business should thrive at the expense of people's dignity." Raul, surprised and confused, remained silent. Danilo then made a special request. "I know the owner of this bakery, and with a phone call, I could complicate your life significantly. But that's not my goal. I also don't agree that your attitude should go unchallenged. I'm going to pay for this lady's lunch, and I want you to prepare the best sandwich on the menu. Maybe this will teach you something about humility." Danilo chose the largest and most expensive sandwich available. Vivian, by his side, smiled with satisfaction, touched by Danilo's gesture. The atmosphere in the bakery was tense, but his intervention made people stop murmuring and watch in silence. Some were clearly moved by Danilo's actions. While Raul prepared Helena's lunch, Danilo invited her to sit at a more private table so she could eat more comfortably. "Helena, please sit down while your meal is prepared. You deserve much more than just a piece of bread." Helena, still emotional, agreed with a shy smile. "I don't know how to thank you." Danilo responded with a warm smile. "We all deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. You are no different." Although some customers continued to murmur, their expressions began to soften as they recognized the depth of Danilo's gesture. Ignoring the comments, he was more interested in hearing Helena's story. "Helena, I'd really like to hear about you if you don't mind. Sorry for asking, but how old are you? How did you end up in this situation?" Danilo thought for a moment before asking the final question gently. "How do you manage to live on the streets at such an old age?" Helena seemed a bit uncomfortable being the center of attention, but Danilo listened attentively, showing that he cared about her story. Helena hesitated for a moment, but seeing the sincerity in Danilo's eyes, she decided to begin talking. "Oh, sir, life on the streets is very hard. You can't imagine how tough it is to receive looks of disdain every day. People pass by me as if I were invisible, or worse, as if I were a nuisance. She paused, recalling painful moments. Sometimes young people mock me, throw things, or act cruelly. Others look at me with fear, as if I were going to do harm just because I'm sitting on the sidewalk. Helena thought for a moment before continuing. But I can't complain about everything. Occasionally, I receive some alms. These small helps help me survive. She began to share more about her story. I've been on the streets for a few years now. I lost my home when I could no longer pay the rent. My daughter died a long time ago, and I have no relatives. I've always lived with limited resources, but the situation worsened, and gradually, I lost everything I had. Danilo listened attentively, his face showing empathy and concern. It must be very difficult for you, Helena. I'm sorry for everything you're going through. Helena shook her head, staring at the table. Yes, but I try to keep going. The people on the street are my only company now. Most are in the same situation as me, struggling to survive day by day. Sometimes we help each other, sharing the little we have, but it's never easy. Danilo felt a lump in his throat. It was hard to imagine how someone so elderly could endure such a difficult life. Is there anywhere you can go? Any shelter or social service that could help you? Helena sighed and replied, I've tried a few shelters, but they're always full, and it's hard to get a spot. Besides, it's not safe. I've seen a lot of bad things happen in those places. I'd rather be on the street, because at least I know what to expect. Raul, who had finished preparing the snack, brought the plate to Helena. Danilo nodded in thanks and turned his attention back to Helena. I'd like to do more for you, not just today, but in a lasting way. Is there anything I can help with to improve your situation? Helena looked at Danilo, surprised and moved by the offer. I don't know. I don't want to be a burden to anyone. This lunch is already enough. As Helena began eating the snack, Danilo continued to reflect. It was hard to believe that a 90-year-old woman could be living on the streets. Then he noticed something peculiar around Helena's neck. A delicate silver necklace with a blue quartz pendant, which sparkled under her scarf. Danilo was very curious about the necklace Helena wore. It was a beautiful necklace with a blue quartz pendant that seemed to shine in a special way. He decided to ask, trying to be polite and not intrusive. Helena, that necklace is very beautiful. It looks very special. Can you tell me more about it? Helena looked at the necklace as if she had just then remembered it. She gently ran her fingers over the pendant and, with a look full of memories, began to speak. This necklace means a lot to me. When my life started falling apart, I thought about selling it several times, but I couldn't bring myself to. It's all I have left from a time when I was happy. Helena fell silent for a moment, as if lost in thought. Danilo, wanting to break the silence, commented, It's a very beautiful object and seems to hold great sentimental value for you. Helena then spoke with a sad tone, but also with a certain pride. This necklace is one of the last memories I have of my daughter, Barbara. After an accident, the hospital gave me this necklace, which she was wearing on the day of the tragedy. When Danilo heard the name Barbara, he was surprised and felt an unexpected connection. His heart raced as he tried to understand better. Could you tell me more about her? Helena, noticing Danilo's interest, continued with a mix of sadness and pride. Barbara was my only daughter. She was a bright young woman, full of life and very kind, always caring for others. She dreamed of being an artist and spent hours drawing and painting. That's why she went to fashion school. Danilo listened attentively and felt his heart ache with Helena's story. The mention of fashion school made him even more emotional. I'm so sorry, Helena. It must have been very difficult for you. Helena nodded, with tears in her eyes. Losing Barbara was the worst pain I've ever felt. It was a terrible and unexpected accident. She had so much ahead of her. Danilo, moved by Helena's sorrow, murmured, I can't imagine how it must have been for you. Helena continued, holding the necklace with great care. After she was gone, the necklace became my last connection to her. It's like a piece of her is always with me. Danilo looked at Helena with empathy and understanding. Helena had a look of confusion and curiosity on her face, her gaze fixed on Danilo. The room was silent, and she broke the silence with a hesitant question. Wait a minute. You mentioned her name was Barbara, didn't you? She noticed that Danilo's tone had changed, as if a wave of nostalgia had enveloped him. Her eyes shone with a mix of sadness and tenderness. Danilo, with a distant look full of memories, began to speak. Yes, Barbara was a vibrant young woman, full of life and dreams. She had an indomitable spirit, always dreaming of making the world a better place. Each day was a new opportunity for her to make a difference. She devoted herself wholeheartedly to everything she did. When she left, it was a devastating blow to me and to everyone who had the fortune of knowing her. As he spoke, Danilo clenched his hands, trying to control the tremor in his voice. Each word seemed heavy with the pain of loss. Helena, absorbing every detail, asked with an anxious tone, "Did you know someone named Barbara?" Danilo's voice grew soft and melancholic, like an old melody that stirred memories. "Yes, I knew a Barbara many years ago. She came into my life in a very special way. We started as friends, sharing laughter and dreams. Over time, our friendship deepened into something more, and we began dating. It was a magical time, but unfortunately, it didn't last. She was an incredible artist with a natural talent for fashion. But after college, we went our separate ways and lost touch. Later, I learned of the tragedy, a car accident that took her from us." Helena's heart raced, and her eyes widened. She blinked several times, stunned by the revelation. "You knew my Barbara?" Her voice was laden with disbelief. Danilo was immersed in a mix of emotions, confused and moved. "I'm not sure. She must have talked more about me to you than I did about her. Did she mention any friend or boyfriend named Danilo?" Tears began to slide down Helena's face, her expression a mix of shock and sadness. Danilo, seeing her suffering, reached out and gently held her hand. His gesture was a silent attempt to offer comfort, sharing the pain in an empathetic way. Helena tried to compose herself, wiping away her tears, and then looked at Danilo with new intensity. She always spoke of a Danilo with such affection. "Are you that Danilo?" Danilo paused, delving into his memories. The weight of recollections seemed to fill the air around him. Finally, he nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "Yes, I believe so." Helena's face lit up with an emotional smile, despite the tears still stubbornly shining in her eyes. "Wow, this is incredible. She always spoke of you with such love, as someone who inspired and loved her deeply." Danilo felt a wave of mixed emotions. The sadness of Barbara's loss mingled with a strange sense of gratitude, grateful for having had the chance to share precious moments with her. He spent the next few minutes recounting to Helena the days when he met Barbara in college, how she was a treasured friend and a source of inspiration. "When I started at the economics college, Barbara was there, studying fashion. She was one of the first people to support and encourage me to follow my dreams. We had endless conversations about the future and our hopes. She always believed in me, even when I doubted myself." Each of Danilo's words was a tribute to Barbara's memory, and Helena listened attentively, absorbing every detail about the young woman she had loved and lost. Danilo was reminiscing about a very special friend he had in college. She was studying fashion and was a very lively and enthusiastic person. Whenever Danilo talked to her, he felt an immense desire to follow his dreams and never give up. They were friends for a long time, but close to graduation, Danilo decided to confess his feelings. That's when they started dating. On the night of the prom, Danilo gave her an amazing gift, a silver necklace with a small blue quartz pendant. Danilo paused for a moment to catch his breath before continuing the story. After graduation, Danilo went on a 6-month exchange program in the United States. Their relationship was still new, and they were very much in love. They talked every night on the phone and counted the days until they could see each other again. Danilo always asked if she was wearing the necklace, and she always said she was. But one day, Danilo tried to call, and she didn't answer. After a week, a friend of hers called to tell him that she had been in an accident. Danilo was devastated, as there were still just 3 months left of his exchange program, and he didn't get a chance to say goodbye. He could never forgive himself for that. Helena listened to Danilo's story with great attention, holding the necklace carefully. She remembered her beloved daughter, Barbara, and began to cry. She confessed that since Barbara had passed away, she had never been the same. That's why she was there with Danilo. Danilo was also sad and shared how Barbara's loss had affected him. He said that since Barbara left, he had never been able to truly connect with anyone else. Helena touched Danilo's hand and said it was comforting to know that Barbara had someone like him by her side. She also mentioned that Barbara always spoke of his support and influence in her life. She had worn the necklace until her last moment. They stayed there for a while, feeling Barbara's presence between them. Finally, Danilo broke the silence and said he would never forget Barbara and everything she meant to him. It was a great blessing to have known her. Helena thanked Danilo with eyes full of gratitude. She said he had given new meaning to the necklace and Barbara's memories. Danilo smiled and said he wanted to do more for Helena and Barbara, not just a simple lunch. He wanted to know how he could help. Helena thought for a moment, touching the necklace again. She said that Danilo's presence and words already meant so much to her, and that the lunch was already beyond what she had hoped for. Danilo began to tell a story that seemed straight out of a fairy tale. He and Barbara had studied fashion together and had become great friends from the start. She had a passionate way of talking about life that made Danilo feel motivated to get up every day and chase his dreams. For a long time, they were just friends, but as graduation approached, Danilo decided to declare his feelings. They started dating, and on the night of the prom, he gave Barbara a silver necklace with a small blue quartz pendant. Danilo paused for a moment, took a deep breath, and continued. After graduation, he went to the United States for a 6-month exchange program. The relationship was still new, but they were in love and talked every night on the phone, counting the days until they could be together again. Danilo always asked if Barbara was wearing the necklace, and she always said yes. But one day, Danilo called, and she didn't answer. After a week, a friend of Barbara's called to deliver the news that she had been in an accident. Danilo was in shock. There were only 3 months left in his exchange program, and he hadn't even had a chance to say goodbye. He could never forgive himself for that. Helena, listening attentively, held the necklace with care. Danilo's words brought vivid memories of Barbara, her beloved daughter. Slowly, tears began to roll down Helena's face. "This is very difficult for me, Danilo," Helena said with a voice full of sadness. "Since Barbara left, I've never been the same. That's why I'm here." Danilo felt a pang in his heart as he shared his pain. "Helena, I understand. Barbara's death marked me forever. Since then, I've never been able to truly connect with anyone." Helena shook her head, gently touching Danilo's hand. "It's comforting to know that Barbara had someone like you by her side. She never stopped talking about your support and influence in her life. She wore this necklace, a piece of you, until her last minute." They were silent for a moment, letting the revelation settle between them. Then Danilo broke the silence with a sad smile. "I never forgot Barbara and everything she meant to me. It was a blessing to have known her." Helena nodded, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you for sharing this with me, Danilo. You've given new meaning to the necklace and Barbara's memories." Danilo smiled gently and said, "I want to do more for you, Helena, for Barbara. I can't just accept this as a lunch. How can I help you?" Helena paused for a moment, touching the necklace again. "Your presence and your words already mean so much to me. This lunch was just a beginning, and I was only expecting a piece of it." Danilo shook his head, feeling a new determination growing inside him. "No, Helena, I need to help you. I want to honor Barbara's memory and have peace in my heart, knowing that I did my final act of love for her." Danilo's voice was choked, but he continued firmly. "Barbara was an incredible person. Not a day goes by without me thinking of her. Knowing that she is in your hands gives me a sense of peace, but I can't accept that you, the mother of the woman I loved so much, should live on the streets." Helena looked at Danilo moved. "It's clear you love my daughter very much. It must have been as hard for you as it was for me. Just don't worry about me." Danilo felt a new resolve within him. "Helena, life has given me a chance to honor Barbara's memory. I'm going to get you off the streets. Come with me to my home, and I'll arrange everything you need to live comfortably." Helena nodded, her eyes full of gratitude. "My God, Danilo, I don't know what to say." Danilo then asked Helena's permission to make an urgent call. He called his secretary and canceled all his appointments for the rest of the week, determined to help Helena in the best way possible. With a gentle smile, Danilo guided Helena to his car. When they arrived at Danilo's house, Helena was impressed by the grandeur and luxury of the place. She had never been in such an imposing environment. "Make yourself at home, Helena. This will be your home for the next few days. Here, you won't have to worry about anything," Danilo said, leading her through the elegant entrance into the spacious and well-decorated interior of the house. Danilo introduced Helena to the room where she would stay temporarily and assigned one of his staff members, Patricia, as her personal caregiver. Patricia was a friendly and welcoming woman, ready to assist Helena with anything she needed. "Feel free to ask Patricia for anything you need. If you're hungry, she can prepare something for you at any time," Danilo explained with a comforting smile. Patricia, with a warm smile, invited Helena for a walk in the garden while she prepared tea and a slice of cake. During the stroll through the well-kept garden, Patricia and Helena began to chat. Patricia shared stories about her work at Danilo's house and her own family, while Helena talked about her life on the streets and the daily struggles she faced. "You're such a kind person, Patricia. I'm so grateful for all this," Helena said, touched by the kindness and hospitality she was receiving. Patricia smiled, placing a cup of tea and a slice of cake in front of Helena, making her feel at home. Helena sat at an outdoor table, where the sun shone gently and the aroma of hot tea and fresh cake filled the air. Danilo, known for his kindness, was always ready to help people, and today was no different. Helena, with a smile, was charmed by Danilo's generosity. She couldn't believe how her life was about to change in such an incredible way. The next morning, Danilo informed Helena that he would have a busy day of appointments and, unfortunately, wouldn't be able to accompany her. But don't worry, Patricia, who was a very attentive friend, would be available to help Helena with anything she needed. Helena thanked him with a smile and a nod, feeling grateful for the concern and care. While Danilo was out, Helena explored the comfortable house and the beautiful surroundings, beginning to get used to the idea of having a safe place to rest. She and Patricia enjoyed the sunshine in the garden and began to talk. Over time, they became friends. Helena told Patricia about Barbara, her beloved daughter who had died in a car accident. She explained that the necklace she wore was one of the few mementos she had of Barbara, a symbol of love and sorrow. Helena mentioned that it was precisely because of this necklace that she and Danilo had become close. "Can you believe it, Patricia? A successful businessman helping a 90-year-old homeless woman find a safe place." Patricia, in turn, opened her heart. She talked about losing her husband years ago and how she had to raise her 2 children on her own. She shared her struggles and triumphs, showing Helena that despite the difficulties, there is always hope and strength to keep going. It's not easy to be alone in the world with 2 kids depending on you, but grief teaches us so much about life. "I'm sure Barbara is looking after you from heaven, just as my husband is looking after me and our children." Helena was moved by Patricia's story. After spending so much time on the streets, she rarely had the chance to have such deep and meaningful conversations. With her empathy and understanding, Patricia became more than a caregiver. She became a true friend. In the middle of the afternoon, Danilo returned home with a serious and determined look. He explained to Helena and Patricia that he needed their help immediately and invited them to get into the car. The adventure was just beginning. "Guys, I can't explain right now," he said, sounding rushed. So, they all went together to a shopping mall. The plan was to help Helena pick out some new clothes while Danilo would go to the market to buy some essentials. At the mall, Patricia and Helena spent a good amount of time choosing comfortable and practical clothes. Patricia made sure everything was perfect for Helena. Meanwhile, Danilo was at the market picking out fresh food and other important items. He was preparing a big surprise for Helena. When Danilo returned to the mall with the purchases, he saw Helena and Patricia waiting with eager smiles. He invited them to get back in the car and took them to a fancy apartment building nearby. Helena was a bit nervous about entering such a sophisticated place, but Danilo reassured her with a gentle gesture. In the elevator, Danilo pressed the button for the 5th floor. When the doors opened, they entered an elegant hallway leading to a large and luxurious apartment. At the apartment door, Danilo turned to Helena with a serious but affectionate look. "Helena," Danilo began, "I lost someone very dear, Barbara. The pain of that loss never goes away. Finding you and being able to help now is a gift for me. This apartment is for you. I hope you find here a safe and comfortable place to call home." Helena was so shocked she could hardly believe what she was seeing. Tears began to roll down her face as she looked at the tastefully decorated apartment filled with things she had never imagined having. She felt overwhelmed and blessed to have found such generous friends like Danilo and Patricia. Danilo then showed Helena and Patricia around the apartment, proud of every detail. Patricia, always attentive to Helena's needs, brought the market purchases and new clothes into the apartment. They began to organize everything: clothes in the closets and food in the immaculate kitchen. As the afternoon turned into evening, Danilo and Patricia helped Helena settle into her new home, now full of life and promises of a better future. It was a wonderful example of the power of compassion and human kindness. Before leaving, Danilo made one last gesture. Helena was deeply moved and speechless when she received the news. Patricia would continue to be her caregiver and share the apartment with her. Danilo, who was helping, would cover all costs and monthly bills. So, Helena would not have to worry about anything related to money. She was so grateful, she could hardly believe the generosity. "You don't know what this means to me, Danilo. Nothing I do will be enough to thank you," Helena said, tears in her eyes. Danilo smiled and promised that he would give Helena a few days to adjust to her new life. He still had more plans for the future. Helena then spent the next few days settling into her new home and chatting with Patricia to pass the time. After many years, she managed to watch an entire episode of the 9 o'clock soap opera, something she used to love doing when she was younger. 3 days later, Danilo returned to Helena's apartment for an important conversation. Sitting at the kitchen table, Danilo shared with Helena an idea he had been contemplating for some time: to create a community fund to help homeless people. But it wasn't just about providing food. Danilo wanted to offer services like job counseling and access to housing. He wanted to prevent others, especially older people like Helena, from having to live on the streets. "Helena, what you went through in that bakery shows that people deserve to live with dignity. It's not enough just to give food. We need to provide real opportunities for them to rebuild their lives," Danilo explained firmly. He outlined his vision of creating a community center that would not only provide meals, but also offer job training, help with job searches, and psychological support. Helena was excited about the idea and agreed that something more needed to be done to help the less fortunate, especially the elderly. "That would be great, Danilo. You can count on me," Helena said. In the following days, Danilo mobilized his entire company team to turn the idea into reality. They met with community members, local business owners, and authorities to discuss how they could collaborate to create a positive impact. Thus, the idea became a concrete plan with the first steps defined. Once upon a time, there was a very special project: to create a fund to help the most needy people in the community. The positive energy and excitement from everyone was contagious. Everyone was thrilled because they wanted to do something really important to help others. Helena was adjusting to her new home, and Patricia was taking care of her with great affection. Helena was very happy to have met Danilo. As the community fund project began to come to life, Helena became more and more involved. She shared her story and inspired others with her courage and hope. Helena, who had already gone through so many difficulties, now saw her life filling up with new possibilities, thanks to Danilo's kindness and the community's unity. After a few months, Danilo announced that he would contribute even more to the community fund. He also wanted to talk to other local business owners to see how they could help, offering jobs, health services, or other forms of support. "If each of us does a little, we can make a big impact," Danilo said. News about the community fund spread quickly throughout the city. Other businesses and entrepreneurs were inspired by Danilo's initiative and began adopting more inclusive and humane practices. Donations started pouring in, not just money, but also food, clothing, and the volunteer work of many people. Meanwhile, Barbara's necklace was still around Helena's neck. It was a powerful symbol of the journey Helena and Danilo were experiencing. The necklace wasn't just a reminder of Barbara or the losses they had faced, but also a sign of their compassion and determination to make a difference in other people's lives. Danilo continued to visit Helena, discussing the fund's progress and listening to her ideas with genuine interest. Their friendship grew stronger each day, guided by the hope of creating a more just and welcoming future for everyone. Helena and Danilo's story showed that small acts of kindness can make a big difference. Barbara's memory lived on through Danilo's actions, inspiring a wave of compassion and solidarity throughout the city. The chance meeting at the bakery ended up uniting two seemingly different destinies, which became inseparable. Thus, Helena and Danilo's journey was not just about meetings and destinies, but a powerful testament to the impact of compassion and determination. Their lives, connected by Barbara's necklace, became a beacon of hope, showing that empathy and hope are the most important values. Did you enjoy the story? The channel Universo Yin Palabras thanks you for your company. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below on what you thought of the story. See you next time.